The Panzer Dragoon Zwei Remake was announced nearly 7 years ago alongside the remake of the original Panzer Dragoon. Since 2018, Forever Entertainment have provided us with the first remake, which was passable after several significant updates, a deeply flawed remake of the first House of the Dead, and an absolutely awful version of the House of the Dead 2, which led me on to this tirade. And they want to remake Panzer Dragoon Zwei? No. Stay away. Stay well away. We discussed the first screenshots of the Zwei remake on a recent podcast episode, but this week Forever Entertainment shared footage of their Panzer Dragoon Zwei remake at the Tokyo Game Show. How did it look? Okay, I think we can all agree that it looks atrocious. What really breaks my heart is that Zwei is one of my favourite games of all time, and this particular level is one of my favourite experiences in any game. What has gone so wrong? Well, I thought I'd break the whole thing down to demonstrate just how much Forever Entertainment have missed the mark. In this instance, I've taken the original Sega Saturn version of the game with footage I captured for my Panzer Dragoon Zwei retrospective earlier on and put it side by side with the remake. The result? Let's take a look. First up, I really hate that there are loading screens for this game. The original game masked its loading so very well, but these remakes just seem to like to advertise how poor they are. Anyway, there's a few things that jump straight out at you. The first is the speed at which Lagi moves. It's just downright ponderous and looks ridiculous with Jean-Luc Lundy aiming his gun behind him, given that they're on the run from the prior episode. On the Saturn, they actually look so much more expressive. There's an agency to their movement. Lagi not only moves faster, but he bounces and shakes as his feet pound the ground. Everything is a lot more muted and stunted on the remake. Environmental detail is significantly increased in the remake, but as a result, like the first game's remake, it loses that mystique that the Saturn game had. Yes, the shading and the fog in the Saturn version are likely to mask the hardware deficiencies, but they work perfectly from an artistic perspective, conveying the desolation and the emptiness to the player. The flat, desolate canyon is traded for a path and rocks peppering the sides in the remake. It feels less like our heroes have escaped to a mountain range decimated by millennia of war, and more like a trek to the closest hiking spot. This is all made worse by a camera that sat so far out. Everything looks closer, from the mountainsides to the assorted enemies, and with the loss of fogging, the sense of scale is all but evaporated. Our dragon simultaneously feels too small and too large, the world feels too compact. Even from the opening, the Saturn version sees you completely enclosed in the canyon. The sky can be barely seen, which is not the case in the remake, where the skybox is immediately visible, shattering the illusion that you're trapped between these towering cliffs. The enemies themselves look okay at least, with the riders, small pyramids, ships and scorpions looking respectable. But for all the design choices in these early goings that really rankle, it's the clear indication of the splitting of the paths that annoyed me the most in these early goings. The route choices are a key part in Zwei's replayability, often being masked and somewhat hidden. But here, Forever Entertainment simply signposts where you can go. As we go down the chosen path, we can see what is essentially the end point of the section of the remake. The stone archway is an interesting touch, but why can we see that far ahead? In the original game, the cliff faces are closed in. It's an oppressive, claustrophobic experience where the foes are hiding above and round corners. That whole sense of danger is lost in the remake. There's no mystique or peril, just a slow, ambling lizard trotting through the hills. Yes, the Saturn version obscured the path to cut down on the polygons it needed to render at the time, but it still played into the game's art style. So what you get in the remake is a slow romp towards the horizon, as the Saturn version sees us bend around the craggy turns in this environment. And then you get the coup de grace, the moment that Lagi finally spreads his wings and flies. Yet this, one of the most critical story points in the series, is fumbled. The leap into the unknown expanse is replaced by a dive into the rocky fields below. There's so much wrong here. The abundance of rocks and protruding cliff edges on the way down means that, theoretically, Lagi could just hop down onto these ledges without needing to leap. There's no hint of such an option in the original Saturn game. It's a jump from the edge of a cliff with nothing but the ground hundreds of feet below. It's a leap of faith in a hopeless situation. That is not the case in the remake, with another overly busy environment that betrays everything that the original game strived for. If we step away and look at Panzer Dragoon Auto on the original Xbox, a game that could easily fill as much environmental detail as it wanted and often did, we can see that it wasn't afraid to fill the screen with nothing, with emptiness. The artists knew exactly what they were doing with both Zwei and Auto, and they do not have a clue with this remake. And what we get is not Lagi flapping his wings and uneasily flying down. The remake has him basically looking downwards and dive bombing to the rocks below, but obviously very slowly. It may be a choice of the player in this instance pointing the camera downward, but Lagi doesn't even seem to bother trying to stay aloft, it's just a straight descent to the floor. As the player lands, we begin our ground assault on the Mechania outpost, and it's here that I think things may actually take a turn for the worse. The uniquely textured ground, foggy architectures and cascading sides in the original game are replaced by lots and lots of brown rocks. It's here that the colour of Lagi 2 really becomes noticeable. The bright blues and pinks of the Saturn game are replaced with, you guessed it, more brown. It feels like the House of the Dead 2 remake piss filter all over again, and it destroys the entire scene. The grey stone walls of the original game clearly differentiate from the canyons in the earlier section, communicating a man-made stone fortress with ramshackle turrets sporting multicoloured ancient weapons that have been hobbled together by the military. In the remake, everything is still brown. The walls look almost no different to the canyons, the dirt and stone floor carrying over from the previous area, making the outpost look less militaristic and more like a small village that you're assaulting. The fact that the Saturn changed the VDP2 ground textures and the scenery so deftly, yet the remake lazily makes the areas nigh on indistinguishable from one another is an absolute travesty given the technology powering these games is 3 decades apart. Things do improve as you get further into the compound, but the state of the Mechania Empire differs greatly. The clean, oppressive staging area in the Saturn contrasts with the dirty, rubble-ridden squalor that we are presented with in the remake. And still the camera destroys any illusion of scale in cinema. As we battle the huge defense structure in the Saturn version, the camera positions itself under Lagi, as it does a number of times in the stage, but it is actually most notable here. It truly conveys how large and intimidating these war machines are. In the remake, the camera simply does not move, completely removing all tension and emotion from the scene. As the attackers from up high on all sides feel overwhelming in the Saturn game, the remake just feels like a run-of-the-mill shooting gallery. And once you get out, on Saturn, you're greeted with the freedom of the wide open plains in the area, communicating the escape from the oppressive enemy base. Yet the remake still throws its brown rocks in the way, diminishing that sense of escape. To make things worse, it changes the dynamic of the final 2 ships, quickly swooping out of nowhere on the Saturn and lazily cresting over the rocks in the remake, once again looking too close and losing all sense of danger and scale. Finally we get to the boss, and to be honest it does actually look the part in terms of geometry and attack patterns, yet it doesn't actually react when you attack it, whereas on Saturn it wobbles as you blast pieces off it. Again, it doesn't communicate the nature of this world and its machinery at all well. Worth noting at this stage was that when I first watched this gameplay, I thought that the berserk attack wasn't initiated at all in the remake. But it is, right there. See that? Now compare it to the light show from the original game. It's night and day. And that's pretty much that. Overall, this demonstrates an abject failure to capture the world, the visual style and the magic of the original game in almost every sense. The one thing that appears to be correct are the enemies, but everything else looks awful. Look, I know that this is a work in progress and is still in development, but I counter that with several facts. Firstly, many of the issues here existed in the original Panzer Dragoon remake, as well as both of the House of the Dead remakes, so forgive me if I don't believe that these will be remedied in the final game. Secondly, Forever Entertainment were proud enough of what they have here that they wanted to show off this demo, and just like the House of the Dead 2, the idea that they want to flaunt this product in its current state does not communicate the idea that it's going to see the wholesale changes needed. And finally, all of Forever Entertainment's games have launched in poor states. Even if the original Panzer Dragoon got to an acceptable state in the end, the House of the Dead remakes are still missing critical features, like modern light gun support, so it's likely that this will launch in much the same way. I've not changed my view on these remakes since that House of the Dead 2 demo. They should not exist if they are not going to be completed with the care, reverence and artistry required to do them justice. Someone on social media suggested that we should be grateful that these remakes exist. To that I say, absolutely bloody not. These products destroy the legacy of the original games, doing irreparable harm to the IPs for modern audiences. If there was any good in the world, this remake would be canned, and instead we would get an emulated collection from Sega instead. But alas, this remake will eventually come to pass, I've got no doubt about that, and when it does, we'll be there to review it, I suppose. Until then, we'll see you on the Sega side.